Let's move on to Moonrise Kingdom, which came out in 2012. The year is 1965, and the residents of an island off the coast of New England inhabit a community that seems untouched by some of the bad things going on in the rest of the world. 12-year-old Sam, played by newcomer Jared Gilman, and Susie, played by newcomer Kara Hayward, have fallen in love and decide to run away, but a violent storm is approaching the island, forcing a group of quirky adults, played by Bruce Willis, Edward Norton, and Bill Murray, to mobilize a search party and find the youths before calamity strikes. And this was co-written by Roman Coppola again.
So this is Wes Anderson's take on both growing out of adolescence and also discovering love for the first time and having a connection, an emotional and intimate connection with another person for the first time.
Yeah, Moonrise Kingdom, I think, it's a very common favorite film of Wes Anderson fans when you talk to them. It's far more than just a movie about childhood, like you just said. It's about growing through childhood and into adolescence and into adulthood even. And Anderson paints this chaotic image of the adult characters caught up in their own inhibitions and failures, which contrasts again with the children's. And we're talking about those themes where the children act like adults and the adults act like children. The Susie and Sam characters, they're very mature for their ages, and they even have this plan to just run away because they want to get away from everyone because their parents are in horrible, like, toxic relationships, dysfunctional family, and again, they're childish people and they want to get away from them.
Yeah. And then with Moonrise Kingdom, I think that this is the film where Wes Anderson's trademark style as a whole, so every aspect of his style, from the camera work to the set design and the wardrobe and the writing, everything had finally become fully formed in this film. I think this is him hitting the Wes Anderson pinnacle of what it was as a film.
Yeah, this was universally adored when it hit theaters. A lot of people really went out and saw this movie.
Yeah, and so I think this is he finally solidified his voice as an artist with this movie.
And we have a new big A-lister into the Wes Anderson world with Bruce Willis entering Wes Anderson movies. He ends up being one of the best characters of the films, and Bruce is naturally a funny guy, so it's awesome to see him in like a great comedy like this because he's funny in a lot of his action movies, but again, he kind of plays like a hero and a cop, but not like a big budget action hero like he usually plays.
Yeah, and then this film I think has probably the most heavy use of insert shots than any of his other films, especially with Sam and Susie with their pen pals letters back and forth to each other, which is one of my favorite sequences of the film, where it's like, "Dear Susie, blah, 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 blah. Dear Sam, blah, blah. Dear Susie, when? Dear Sam, where?"
Yeah, it's great because a lot of you younger kids don't understand. We used to literally write letters to people, and the fun thing about it was it took so much time just to get like one response to something because you had to write it out, you had to send it in the mail, you had to wait for them to get it, you had to wait for them to write out their response, then put it in the mail, then you pick it up just to get a one like sentence remark or like a response. But Wes does it in a really funny way where it's just one word questions, one word responses, and he does it in quick cuts, so it's almost like these very formal text messages that they're sending back and forth.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. And he also used for the first time, so yeah, he's used narration before, but for this film, he broke the fourth wall for the first time, having that character narrate the film, speaking directly into the camera, speaking to the audience in several scenes. And there's actually a moment where it's nighttime and he's on the beach and there's a light shining on him, and then he finishes his narration and then he actually turns the light off on camera.
Oh yeah.
It's really funny.
In this film, again, in a lot of his films, dysfunctional families, which you can't help but think, did this happen to him as a kid with his parents and maybe treating him with neglect? Because the accepting of responsibility is prevalent throughout the film with the adults. And Susie's parents borderline neglect her, and she constantly fights with her mother, and her father acts like he wishes he wasn't a father. Sam's guardians give up their parental responsibilities to Sam for all the trouble he's caused. And this movie brings up kind of this philosophical debate where do children owe their parents a debt for parents' clothing, feeding, raising them, protecting them with a house and putting a roof over their head? Or do parents owe their children a debt and responsibility for bringing them into the world when they had no control of being born? You know, no child chooses to be born, so is there a moral contract between a parent and a child? But really, successful families are held together by love, not by moral contracts.
What's interesting about this movie is this is his first period piece. And then after this, he made Grand Budapest, The French Dispatch, also a period piece. So I think this is Wes discovered with Moonrise Kingdom, I think, that period pieces are where he's going to be making his films from now on. I doubt I highly doubt that Wes Anderson will make a contemporary film again.
I can see that because he loves typewriters, bro.
Yeah. Same thing with Paul Thomas Anderson. I don't see Paul Thomas Anderson making a contemporary film again, and probably Tarantino as well. So I think with Moonrise Kingdom, he fell in love with being able to not just create this fantastical version of our reality, but also to set it in a time period of the past. And I think he really excelled at it in this film. And so that's why I think Budapest and all of his films from now on will probably be period pieces.
I can agree with that.
Yeah.
And the entire plot of this film basically rides on the shoulders of this new young relationship between these two kids. And like if Life Aquatic, like I said, is Wes Anderson's take on like Jaws, this is Wes Anderson's take on like Romeo and Juliet. And the romance between Sam and Susie, it's incredibly endearing, it's powerful, and it's kind of like so strong that it's like out of the control of the kids' hands. And the parents are even blown away by how much they care for each other and the lengths they go to be with each other.
Yeah.
And Susie is this very passionate and raw person. She's angry with everybody. She gets in the fights at school. And she escapes her reality with her fantasy books. And when those don't become enough for her, I think that's why she decides to run away with Sam. And it's ironic that despite Susie being the one with a family, she has the emotional and social problems. Like she finds that book that like the fridge where it's like how to talk to like your troubled
kid.
Yeah. But really, and like it's ironic because she has parents, but Sam seems like an emotionally sound kid, but he was an orphan.
This movie becomes extremely fun when these two finally hatch their plan and escape together. And it's this fun sequence where they're traveling together and like they're a couple now. They've left their lives behind and now they're like gonna be together forever, which is kind of how kids think, especially when kids like get their first boyfriend or girlfriend. It's like, oh, we're gonna be together forever, we're in love, but you barely even know each other.
Yeah. And then they deal with the hurricane. I think that the impending hurricane is a metaphor for the transition from adolescence to adulthood, because Sam and Susie go through this intense transformation. Like they get married and everything. And due to the life experiences, they now act even more like adults, but they're forced to be separated. And although Susie like hates her mother for the secret affair she has with Bruce Willis's character in the beginning of the film, she ends up having like a secret affair with Sam that they keep hidden throughout the rest of the remaining of the film.
Yeah. The hurricane, I agree with you, but in a different way, because what happens is after the hurricane takes place, it actually erases the beach where they had like their little getaway from the physicality of the island, so it becomes washed up. And I think maybe that beach was their childhood, and now it's gone because of the hurricane.
Yeah, and this film, like it does have a happy ending to a sense, but it's not a completely happy ending. Of course, if you've seen it, Sam ends up being taken in by Bruce Willis's character. He takes him in and adopts him and accepts responsibility for him.
And he has his own little police uniform.
Yeah, it's hysterical. and then Susie's back home with her mother and her father and her family. But at the very last shot of the movie, she like gives a smile, but it's not really like a full wide smile. She just kind of like accepts her life now. Overall, it's a beautifully shot film. It's hysterical. Great performances all around. Edward Norton's great in this movie as the scout leader.
Yeah.
Frances McDormand plays Susie's mother. She's great in it too. But all around, everybody's great in this movie. It's a super fun movie to watch if you've never seen it before.
And what I think really helped Wes Anderson with this movie was the small scale of it, because he had done some bigger movies before this, and he did the animated films, which are big productions on themselves. And it's really fun to think that with this film, his movies had started making good money so he could get budgets. But this film, he only got a budget of $6 million, which is actually less money than he had for Bottle Rocket. So imagine putting these two movies up against each other. Just the production of Moonrise Kingdom looks like it's $50 million compared to Bottle Rocket. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So because he learned so much from his previous films, and he has finally developed his style in a fully formed manner, he's able to do so much with so little money.
There are a few things about this film and a lot of Wes Anderson's films that people criticize. Specifically with Moonrise, people criticize his repetitive nature that he kind of incidentally uses, like the yellow tent, which is obviously in Royal Tenenbaums and everything. And the thing with Wes and a lot of unique filmmakers is I don't think they really care if they repeat themselves or if there are connections between their movies, because if you think about it, like a director as unique in a tour like Wes, his collection of films, again, they're not for everybody. They're their own universe, their own world. It's like if it was in a library, he'd have his own little shelf, and it would just be Wes Anderson films.
Yeah.
A lot of authors are like that. I mean, it's like Dr. Seuss, basically, with books, where no one makes books like Dr. Seuss. He has that unique vibe, and they're all very similar, but it's the same thing with movies, and I think people are a little overly critical of Wes Anderson for things like that.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, there are things that are redundant in his films in a way, but I don't think it's a weakness. I enjoy those things because I've come to expect them because I love them so much. I love the quirkiness. I love the weird dialogue. I love the set design. I love the fairy tale quality of his films. And so I actually look for the Wes Andersonisms. I want to see the things. I want to see the insert shots. So I don't think it's a hindrance. Those are one of the highlights of going to a Wes Anderson movie.